Is there a doctor on board? A flight attendant hurriedly made her way down the aisle, calling out to the economy class passengers. Suddenly, there was a commotion on the plane I was on, as people wondered what had happened. A passenger is having a medical emergency. Is there a doctor on board? The flight attendant's anxious expression conveyed the seriousness of the situation. But no one raised their hand. So, I'm here, I said, raising my hand alone. I was on my way back to my hometown after quitting my job as a doctor, due to a certain incident. Thank goodness. A passenger suddenly lost consciousness. What I saw when I was taken to the scene was a passenger lying in the aisle, completely motionless. Please, help us. The family of the passenger pleaded tearfully. Seeing this, I said, of course. I will help. Despite having quit, I returned to my role as a doctor and nodded firmly. Thank you for your help earlier. Thanks to the quick first aid, the passenger regained consciousness safely. As soon as the plane landed at the airport, the flight attendant who had shouted, "Is there a doctor on board?" earlier, came running after me. She straightened her back and gave me a very polite bow. Oh, it was nothing. I was just doing what anyone in my position would have done. It had been a long time since anyone had expressed such heartfelt gratitude. I felt both embarrassed and deeply touched. I, Alex Martin, scratched my head and looked down at the airport floor. Then, it happened. That habit of scratching your head hasn't changed, has it, Alex? Ha! Startled by the sudden mention of my name, I looked up. The flight attendant, with her glamorous makeup, was smiling brightly. You're Alex, right? From B High School? What, how do you know that? I was taken aback by how she knew even my high school, and I stared at her. Then, don't stare at me like that. It's so dark in the airplane that I ended up putting on too much makeup. She mumbled shyly. Her cheeks slightly red. I recognized that habit of hers. Could it be Anna? Correct. The flight attendant now wore a slightly more youthful, innocent smile. Amazingly, she was my childhood friend, Anna. Anna, is it really you? Yes. Did you not recognize me because of the heavy makeup? No, you look so beautiful now, I didn't recognize you. Oh, come on. It's embarrassing when you say such things so seriously. It wasn't just flattery, and Anna truly had become beautiful. That's because we grew up in a small rural town. Back then, Anna was notably plain and unpolished, and she was so self-conscious about it that she always walked with her head down. But now, she had become a sophisticated city woman. Anna, a flight attendant. Surprised? That a country bumpkin like me is doing such a glamorous job? No. It's okay. I'm used to that reaction by now. Walking side by side with Anna, who chuckled softly, we began walking down the hallway. Her confident, upright posture as she walked made her seem like a different person. And indeed, she was truly beautiful. I was captivated by her dignified profile, almost forgetting she was my childhood friend. However, the next moment, I suddenly came back to my senses. Alex, you became a doctor. Wow, you really achieved your dream. Oh. Alex? I had suddenly stopped walking, and Anna stopped as well, tilting her head in curiosity. No, it's not like that. What? I got fired. So? I'm not a doctor anymore. What do you mean? I fell silent. I stared at the floor, lost in thought. I remembered the empty days I had been living for so long. And the fact that I had lost a life because of my mistake. After graduating from a university in New York, I started working at the affiliated General Hospital. It was a so-called huge hospital with over 1,000 beds. The number of patients relying on us was enormous, and the number of doctors working there was also significant. Among them, I couldn't say I was exceptionally talented. I was never entrusted with surgeries, and I just went through the motions of daily outpatient care and night duties. My colleagues whispered behind my back, "He's not going to get anywhere." That changed when I was 29. It was triggered by a word from one of my superiors. Alex, would you like to take on this surgery? What? What did you just say, Professor Owens? The superior was Dr. Owens, who served as the professor and head of surgery. Despite having joined the hospital from an outside institution, he had risen to the position of professor due to his impressive record of successfully performing numerous difficult surgeries. He was an ideal boss who even took notice of someone as unremarkable as me. Amazingly, he proposed to me, "Would you like to be the lead surgeon for a certain operation?" "No, I can't do it." "Why not?" "You're diligent and handle your daily work seriously. I trust and want to entrust this to someone like you. But I still lack experience." "Even without experience, you've put in the effort to match it. Haven't you?" Professor Owens. He had been watching me. He had seen how I practiced surgeries on my own between daily duties. "Take the challenge. Don't worry, I'll be right there to support you." "All right." Later, I attempted my first surgery. The result was a great success. This boosted my confidence as a doctor, and I started to request surgeries myself by saying, "Please let me handle the operation." Even amidst my increasingly busy days, I continued to study and practice further. I eventually succeeded in a series of high-difficulty surgeries. By the age of 30, I had become known as the young genius surgeon. However, it was once again a word from Professor Owens that changed my fate. "Alex, from now on, I want you to work as my assistant for a while." "What?" Professor Owens, with the same smile as when he entrusted me with my first surgery, patted me on the shoulder. Having already established my position as a surgeon, I couldn't believe what he was saying. Why should I be an assistant now? And seeing through my thoughts, he adopted a slightly stern expression. "I don't want to say it, but have you been getting a bit overconfident lately?" "What?" "Being called a genius and excellent doctor at such a young age, I feel like you've become a bit arrogant." "Do you realize that?" "That's..." "Don't worry. You're still young, and you can restart as many times as you need." Professor Owens. Professor Owens gently patted me on the shoulder as I looked down in embarrassment. "Go back to basics and start learning surgery from scratch again, under me." Yes. I was deeply grateful to Professor Owens. By giving me some tough love, he made me realize how overconfident I had become. Not only did he not abandon me, but he also showed me the proper way to be a doctor. Or so I thought, but that was a mistake. In my first surgery as an assistant, I realized the truth. Professor Owens's real intention. "From here on, you'll take over as the lead surgeon." What? In front of me was a patient whose abdomen had just been opened. Yet Professor Owens was removing his gloves and heading for the exit. "Professor Owens." I called out in a panic, and he turned his face toward me. I could see his smile even through the mask. "You can handle the rest," he said. Despite the high difficulty of the surgery, it somehow ended successfully. When Professor Owens heard the news, he nodded with satisfaction. "I knew you'd be fine, Alex. I trusted you." After that, every time a surgery started, he would always leave the operating room right after it began, saying, "You handle the rest." And then, "I think you understand by now." Even in this surgery, I was the one who performed it to the end. Isn't that right? Yes. This was an unspoken rule in our workplace. Even if the assistant successfully completed the surgery, the credit belonged to Professor Owens. For more than 10 years, he had been making talented doctors his assistants and having them carry out surgeries on his behalf. No one dared to risk accusing such a well-trusted surgical professor as Professor Owens, not even Miller, the hospital director. And I was no different. The next surgery is expected to be difficult as well. I'm expecting good results from you. Yes. Professor Owens flashed an ugly smile, revealing his true nature. If I had prioritized justice over self-preservation at that time, that patient might not have lost a life. 3 years passed, during which I continued to perform surgeries at Professor Owens's command. Then one day, the hospital was struck by an emergency. A new patient is coming in immediately. The treatment room is full, line them up in the hallway. Get more blood transfusion packs, quickly. The tense voices of doctors and nurses echoed throughout the surgical floor as a large number of people rushed around. The treatment rooms and hallways were overflowing with severely injured patients covered in blood. The groans and cries of "help me and it hurts" created an atmosphere that was like a scene from hell. It was an unprecedented multi-vehicle accident involving more than 10 cars and trucks. The injured were all transported at once to our nearby hospital. Handle the minor injuries over there with first aid, send the severe cases to me. Yes, sir. As a mid-level surgeon, I gave instructions to the junior doctors and prioritized the treatment of the seriously injured. However, the stream of patients was never ending. Staff from other departments rushed to help, and the entire hospital worked together to save lives. But Professor Owens was nowhere to be seen. Where did he go? What are you doing, Alex? As I looked around at the chaos, our voices overlapped. Professor Owens, where have you been at a time like this? And what about you? What are you doing at such a crucial time? What? Our conversation was completely out of sync. When I frowned in confusion, Professor Owens calmly spoke as if he couldn't see the devastation in front of him. You have a surgery scheduled now, don't you? Hurry up and get to it. What are you talking about? I shouted at Professor Owens, my voice echoing down the hallway. However, Professor Owens remained unfazed, even as I grabbed him by the collar. He tightly grasped my wrist. I told you today's surgery is important. After all, it's Mr. Carter from S Industries. In other words, he was telling me to prioritize a VIP patient, whose life was not in immediate danger, over the severely injured people right in front of us. If the surgery succeeded, we would receive a large donation. This would secure his position as the next hospital director. Now, come on. The patient is waiting. By now, Professor Owens was grinning with a hideous smile. Professor Owens pulled me, trying to drag me to the operating room. Suppressing my nausea, I shook off his hand. I'm not going. I have an emergency surgery to perform. What did you say? You're the lead surgeon, Professor Owens. You can perform the surgery yourself. Ignoring the stunned Professor Owens, I took the patient to the operating room. Even during the emergency surgery, Professor Owens kept urging me to come quickly. But I ignored them all, focusing solely on the patient in front of me. Eventually, the surgery was completed successfully, and the patient's life was saved. As I breathed a sigh of relief, I realized that Professor Owens had stopped sending messages over an hour ago. Professor Owens, I'm sorry for being late. The surgery. I was supposed to assist with the surgery as well. Out of a sense of duty, I rushed to the operating room where Professor Owens was. And then... Really, Alex? You took your time, Professor Owens muttered without even looking at me. The operating room was filled with a heavy atmosphere. The reason was... No way. The surgery was supposed to have a high success rate. But the patient lying in the center of the room had already gone into cardiac arrest. According to the nurses present, it was entirely Professor Owens's mistake. He had made an incision in the wrong place, causing the patient to suffer massive bleeding. Yes, many people had witnessed Professor Owens's error. However, by the time the situation was explained to the bereaved family, it was said that I had been the one in charge of the surgery and that my mistake had cost the patient's life. I will never forgive you. The tearful face of the bereaved family shouting is still etched in my memory. In the end, the hospital settled with the family, and I wasn't held responsible for the mistake. But... Alex, if only you had listened to me, there wouldn't have been any problems. In that sense, it was indeed your mistake. Professor Owens sneered, handing me a dismissal notice. After pinning the blame on me and isolating me, by turning the entire surgery department against me, he finally forced me out of the hospital. I had done what I believed to be a doctor's duty by saving patients who seek help. Yet, it resulted in the death of another patient. What should I have done? What is my job as a doctor supposed to be? In my desperation, I found myself on a plane headed to my hometown. I wanted to return to my family home, which I hadn't visited in over 10 years. I wanted to see my family, whom I hadn't seen in so long, right away. Driven by that determination. Alex? Anne appeared at my face with concern as I fell silent. Her voice brought me back to reality. Oh, sorry, I was just lost in thought. Are you okay? You look really pale. Yeah, it's just a lot of things going on. I simply explained to Anna, I quit my job, and I'm heading back to my family home. So you're going home, does that mean you'll be taking over the family business? Probably. Wow. I try to go back as often as I can between flights, so if that's the case, it means I'll get to see you all the time. What? Does that mean she wants to see me? Anna, who had grown so beautiful, beamed and spoke excitedly, making my heart skip a beat. She continued, still looking at me intently, unaware of my reaction. It's really been years since I've seen you, Alex. I'm off tomorrow. Would you like to get together with everyone who stayed in our hometown? No, I think I'll pass. I'm not really in the mood for that. I see. Everyone has times like that. Sorry, I got carried away, she apologized. No. You're just like you used to be, I thought suddenly, feeling nostalgic. When I was down, she wouldn't dig into the details and would always try to encourage me with positive words. She really is still Anna. Hey. Talk a lot with your dad, okay? Huh? He seemed lonely on his own. I'm sure he's been waiting for you to come home, wanting to see you. Promise me, she said with a smile. Anna waved goodbye with a small wave and walked away, pulling her suitcase. As I watched her confident figure walk away, I thought to myself, Dad wants to see me. This filled me with a strange, ticklish feeling of disbelief. It was complicated, but not unpleasant. Because my father and I had parted ways after a fight 16 years ago. My family, the Martin family, has been a farming family for generations. From spring to summer, we grew potatoes, and from autumn to winter, we grew radishes. The person who mainly managed the large fields was my father, Miles. My mother used to farm with him, but when I was in middle school, she suddenly passed away from an illness. So during my school years, I went to school on weekdays and helped my father on the weekends. That was until I said, I want to apply to medical school, during my freshman year of high school. Wow, did Dad do this? I was impressed, although it was only natural for him to do this. It was just after the summer harvest, and he was preparing to plant the next crops. As far as I could see, the fields stretched out beautifully and neatly. Did he finish this all by himself? That's amazing. Being away made me realize how incredible my father was. Now that I've worked, I understand the difficulty of sticking with the same job. When I see my father, that's the first thing I want to tell him. Dad, where could he be? Maybe over there? Just as I set foot into the farm. Stay out. A sharp, thorny shout came from behind. Startled, I turned around, and standing there was Dad. What are you doing back here now? Get out. His work clothes were dirty with dust. A towel hung around his neck, and he wore a worn-out cap. He looked exactly the same as he did back then. But my father was even angrier at me than when we parted ways after that fight 16 years ago. Dad, look, I quit my job. So what? Did you come here to beg for money? What? That comment really got to me. Hadn't he been waiting for me to come home because he wanted to see me? I was glad, but his attitude was a shock and made me even angrier. Hey, are you still mad about what happened back then? You're in the way. I don't have money for you, so go back to New York. You can't talk to your son like that. I crouched down next to him, pulling weeds alongside my father. If I'm in the way, maybe he'll listen to me after this work is done. I was half hopeful and half worried for my father, who seemed to have grown smaller. But my father's response was to shove his dirt-covered hands at me. What? I was pushed forcefully and tumbled backward onto the ground. When I protested, saying, I was trying to help you, why did you do that? And he coldly responded, no thanks. Why not? It's a lot of work for you to do alone. Then why did you become a doctor? What? You abandoned your parents and hometown to go to New York on your own. Now you're back because you hate being a doctor? You're pathetic. Someone like you has no right to touch the fields our family has protected for generations. Just leave. Dad. No matter what I said after that, he completely ignored me. So I reluctantly went inside the house and knelt in front of my mother's altar, saying, "I'm sorry I didn't come back sooner." As I waited for my father to finish his work and come home. When I first said, "I want to become a doctor," my father vehemently opposed the idea. "What will happen to the farm if you leave? Do you want to destroy the family business that's lasted for generations? There's no way you could become a doctor." I remember saying terrible things to my father in return, words spoken out of anger. I actually thought being a farmer was an uncool job, and I hated it. If it collapses, so be it. Dad was only a farmer because he wasn't smart enough for anything else, and so on. It escalated into a huge fight, almost to the point of blows, and I stopped helping him entirely. It was partly because I stubbornly threw myself into studying, determined that I'll definitely get into medical school. And it was because my father also went ahead and threw away all my work clothes and boots. That was the final straw, and we stopped talking altogether. Even when I got into medical school, I simply left the acceptance letter on the table in silence. I never found out whether my father ever saw it. Yikes. What time is it? The sound woke me up, and I found the house completely dark. It seemed I had fallen asleep in front of the altar while waiting for my father. I haven't been sleeping much lately. Perhaps feeling safe at home, I felt like I had slept deeply for the first time in a while. As I stood up and stretched, light leaked through a gap in the sliding door. On the other side of the altar room was the living room, where my father always had his evening drink. "Dad, what's that?" When I opened the sliding door, my father was there, but he wasn't drinking alcohol. It was a glass of water. And some medication that looked like it was prescribed by a hospital. "What medicine is that? Are you feeling unwell?" He didn't say anything. Ignoring my question, my father downed the medication with the water in one gulp. Then he crumpled the empty packaging in his hand and stood up. "It's none of your business." "How can you say that? I am your son, after all." "My son?" His voice was as cold as it had been during the day, rejecting me. As if to say, "Where is this son of mine? I don't want you to worry about me. You did whatever you wanted, leaving for New York and then coming back whenever you pleased. I don't remember having such a selfish and shameless person as my son. Why are you like this? Look, I'm sorry for what happened in the past. I don't need your apology. I don't even want to talk to you. Dad." The more I tried to say, the more stubborn my father became. I was so happy to see him again. But it was clear he wasn't, and he seemed to be saying, "I never wanted to see you again." The vast difference between our feelings was unbearably sad. I'm not going to ask what happened. But in the end, being a doctor was too much for you. That's why you slunk back here. What? Frustration rose within me at his ignorance of what had happened to me. Sorrow filled me at his unwillingness to even ask. Rejected by my father, whom I hadn't seen in 16 years, I was overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions and just stood there, paralyzed. As he walked past me in silence, I heard the sliding door shut with a loud snap behind me, and I collapsed, all the strength leaving my body. If I knew it would be like this, I shouldn't have come back. At this moment, I hadn't yet noticed the message on my phone. It said, "Can we meet tomorrow? Alex, are you okay?" The next day, Anna arrived right on time at the meeting place, a nearby park, with a worried expression on her face. "Your complexion is terrible, even worse than yesterday." "Heh, a lot happened yesterday." I tried to brush it off with a forced smile. But suddenly, Anna's figure blurred before my eyes. I felt something wet on my cheek and touched it. "Ha!" I was crying. Tears started pouring out uncontrollably. "Sorry, Anna. I guess today's not a good day." "Alex, hey. If you want, you can talk to me about it." "No, I'm fine now." "I've never seen you cry before, Alex. Something really bad must have happened, right?" I fell silent. To be honest, I was at my breaking point. Too many things had happened in such a short time, and being rejected by my father last night was the last straw. Part of me didn't want to see anyone, but another part wanted someone to listen, and I decided to take Anna up on her offer. Actually, as soon as Anna sat down on the bench next to me, I began my story. About the days when I was used by Professor Owens and constantly had my accomplishments stolen. How it eventually led to the worst-case scenario, with me being blamed and kicked out of the hospital. And the disastrous reunion with my father. During my long story, I was looking down the whole time, so I hadn't noticed at all. I didn't notice that Anna, sitting next to me, was quietly shedding far more tears than I was. Anna. Surprised, I looked at her, and she forced a crumpled smile through her tear-streaked cheeks. But it quickly distorted, and more fresh tears began to flow. Are you okay? I'm sorry, even though you're the one who's hurting, Alex. No. I'm sorry, it's because I said something unnecessary. No. My father hadn't been waiting for my return. That's why last night, I thought I shouldn't have come back, but after a night's sleep, my thinking changed. It was a shock, but I'm glad we talked. It's like I've finally let go. So, does that mean? Yeah. I think I'll quit being a doctor after all. Many times before, I had moments where I thought, I just want to quit. The reason I clung to my job as a doctor was perhaps because I felt guilty for going against my father's objections to pursue it. But if my father no longer considers me his son, then maybe I don't need to care about what he thinks. Besides, I no longer have the confidence to continue working as a doctor. I don't even know anymore why I worked so hard, what it was all for. The more I tried, the more I was used by a coward. The more I was shunned by others, and in the end, I took a life. That wasn't your fault, Alex. It was me. I kept taking surgeries because I didn't want to fall out of favor with Professor Owens. That caused his skills to dull, leading to such a mistake. I will never forget the fact that a life was lost. The words in grief of the bereaved family will be something I carry with me forever. Even if I start a new job. Alex. Anna seemed unsure of what to say after I shared such a heavy story. She opened and closed her mouth repeatedly, finally whispering, "You know," as if squeezing the words out. I wondered if you might get mad at me for saying this. I wasn't sure if I should bring it up. Clenching her fists on her knees, she seemed to make up her mind and spoke. There was a time when I thought about giving up on life. What? I actually transferred to the airline I'm working at now. At my previous company, there was a senior colleague I just couldn't get along with. She was always criticizing me, belittling everything from my appearance to my work. Eventually, even the colleagues who were on my side started distancing themselves from me. Reaching her mental limit, Anna left the company as if to escape. She then returned home and spent about a year living as a recluse. She hardly ate and couldn't even talk to her family. But, even so, I never grew to hate being a flight attendant. Even now. Just thinking about those days with that colleague makes me tremble, but seeing the passengers' smiles was always enjoyable. And I loved being able to proudly work as a flight attendant. And now, it's so much fun. Without hesitation, Anna responded with a beaming smile. It was a bright and radiant smile, hard to believe from someone who had experienced such hardship. Of course, there are still tough times now and then, but it's so much fun that I'm working hard at this company. So you shouldn't quit being a doctor, Alex. What? I wish I could tell my past self, just quit that company and find another place to work quickly. After all, there isn't just one airline company in the world. And there are countless hospitals in the world, right? The world is vast, and there isn't just one place where you belong. As long as you have the strength, you can start over and restart your life as many times as you want. These words came from Anna, someone who once nearly lost the will to live. As long as your body and mind are healthy, you can start over as many times as you need to. Isn't that what your job is all about, Alex? I was taken aback by those words. I really think it's an amazing job. You were so cool when you helped that passenger on the plane. My job. It was a truly eye-opening moment. I suddenly felt like everything was clear. I remembered why I wanted to become a doctor in the first place, the feelings I had when I first thought, I want to be a doctor. When my mother fell suddenly ill, I was devastated. When she passed away so quickly despite all efforts to save her, I was even more devastated. I never wanted to feel that way again. And I didn't want anyone else to go through it, either. That's why I took the entrance exam for medical school in New York, despite my father's fierce opposition. Even after becoming a doctor, I continued to study and practice surgery without fail. But it wasn't for the patients. The frustration of being the only one among my peers who wasn't trusted to perform surgeries. That frustration gradually changed my motivation. I became more focused on having my skills recognized by others than on saving patients and their families. That's why I caught Professor Owens's attention. My desire to be recognized was satisfied, but I ended up being used, yet still. Maybe I'll try again. This time, for someone else. But could I really do it? As I wavered in my confidence, Anna gave me a reassuring smile. "You're definitely going to be fine, Alex," she said. And she shared her strength with me by gripping my hand firmly. Perhaps even the gods saw my determination. The next day, a significant trial awaited me. It happened when I felt uncomfortable staying at home, and went into town by bus in the morning to pass the time. By chance, as I passed by the only general hospital in town, I glanced over at the parking lot and was startled. "What? Are you okay?" I hurried over to find a man clutching his chest and leaning against a small truck. I arrived just in time. The man collapsed onto the ground as if his strings had been cut. "Hold on. Is your chest hurting? Let me see." I carefully lifted the man's body to lay him on his back. At that moment, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Dad." The man who had collapsed before me was my father, who had ignored me that morning and gone to the fields alone. "Can you hear me?" "It's me, Dad." Oof. Perhaps not realizing it was me, my father didn't respond to my call and just groaned in pain, clutching his chest. His labored breathing, the cold sweat beading on his forehead, and the chest pain were all signs of a serious problem. And most of all, the prescription that had fallen beside him, all of these confirmed my diagnosis. "Dad, where's your medicine? You carry it with you in case of an attack." As I called out to him, I hurriedly searched his bag, wallet, and anywhere else that seemed likely. Finally, I found a pill case in his pants pocket and forced the medication into his mouth. "Is everything all right?" Just as his pained expression eased a bit, a nurse spotted us and came running over. I asked her to treat him immediately and followed as my father was wheeled into the hospital on a stretcher. There, I learned that my diagnosis had been correct. "Thanks to your precise first aid, his condition is stable now." "Are you a medical professional?" The doctor who treated my father was an elderly man with white hair, who introduced himself as the attending physician. He was shorter than me, but had an unmistakable air of authority. I noticed his nameplate read Clark, with the title director below it. Instead of answering his question, I asked my own. "Dr. Clark, does my father have angina?" "Father. So you must be," he said. "I'm his son, Alex. I may be inexperienced, but I'm a doctor." Dr. Clark nodded, murmuring, "I see." As if it all made sense to him. He then told me what he knew. My father had been suffering from angina for more than 10 years. This isn't the first time my father's had an attack, is it? There have been several occasions before. Fortunately, until now, the attacks have been mild. And he's been able to take the medicine himself, nitroglycerin, or neighbors who found him called an ambulance. But this was the first time he'd experienced such a severe attack. And just a moment ago, tests revealed that his condition had progressed more than expected, and before his heart deteriorates further, immediate intervention is necessary. Regretting the late discovery, Dr. Clark informed me with a stern expression. "Intervention, you mean surgery?" "Yes. Considering his age, it would be best to proceed right away. But it's already too late for a catheter. Angina is a condition where the heart's movement deteriorates due to the blockage of the coronary arteries, essential vessels that supply blood to the heart muscle. There are two main types of surgery for angina. One is catheter surgery, which involves inserting a thin tube into the coronary artery to improve blood flow in the blocked area. However, if the condition has progressed, the catheter may no longer be effective. In such cases, a coronary artery bypass surgery is performed, which creates a new pathway for blood by connecting a new vessel from the aorta past the blocked section. My father needs bypass surgery. Then please, do it immediately. As I clung to his white coat, Dr. Clark told me the harsh reality. There was no precedent for bypass surgery at this hospital. And they had no cardiac surgeons on staff who had experience with the procedure. Alex, as a doctor, you know how much skill and speed are required for bypass surgery. Ah. Dr. Clark's words brought back some of my composure. Other doctors nearby also knew how difficult bypass surgery was, so they awkwardly avoided my gaze. So, I raised my hand high, ensuring everyone in the room could see it. I'll do it. Alex, you. My specialty is cardiac surgery. Dr. Clark, please let me perform my father's surgery. Confusion and murmurs spread among those present. Of course, it was only natural when a patient's family member suddenly asked to perform surgery. No one here knew that I had once made a name for myself as a cardiac surgeon. I have experience with bypass surgery as well. Please. Even so. Our facilities. As I bowed my head, the air of confusion grew even more palpable. I bit my lip, thinking it was hopeless, and then, I will take responsibility. A solemn voice echoed through the room, causing everyone to look up in surprise. The voice belonged to Dr. Clark, who continued speaking as he looked around at his fellow doctors. I will ensure the necessary facilities. Can you trust me on this? But, Dr. Clark. Alex. As the director of this hospital, I can entrust you with the surgery. Especially to you, who was once called a genius surgeon. What? How did he know? Dr. Clark looked at me straight in the eye. His face showed no hesitation, and he genuinely believed in me. And he conveyed strongly. I was the only one who could save my father. I will definitely save my father, so please help me. Of course. I'll do everything I can. Dr. Clark nodded firmly. He then completed the preparations for surgery in no time and patted me on the shoulder as the day of my father's operation arrived. Seeing my nervousness. It will be all right. You'll succeed, Alex. Yes. Dr. Clark's strong encouragement. The determination that I would absolutely save my father. And the faith in myself that had carried me through countless surgeries. With those things in my heart, I stepped into the operating room. And the surgery, which lasted over 5 hours, ended in a great success, with Dr. Clark giving his full seal of approval. Impressive, Alex. Just as I'd heard. After the surgery, while watching over my sleeping father, I was taking a break. Dr. Clark came into the hospital room and said that with a gentle smile. You knew about me? I've known your father, Miles, for a long time. I used to pester him about not drinking too much. But it didn't seem to get through to this stubborn man. Dr. Clark had heard from my father that I had become a doctor. I prepared myself, thinking he must have complained about me, saying things like, he abandoned his parents to go to New York, or, he's ungrateful, but he was worried about you. What? Well, at first, at least. But when you started making a name for yourself, he'd bring clippings from medical journals and newspapers and... Reminiscing about those days, Dr. Clark looked at my father's face. Then he shared an unexpected fact with me. Many times he showed them to me, beaming with pride, saying, my son's in this, have a look. He said, having accomplished such wonderful work. Alex is my pride and joy. What? I couldn't believe my ears. I couldn't believe my father would say such things. He had been angry with me for leaving him behind and going to New York for the past 16 years. He wanted you to take over the family business, and there's no doubt about that. Even after you went to New York, he lamented. I won't be able to face our ancestors if it ends with me. That's why he couldn't openly support you. But he was the one who was the happiest for your success and cheered for you more than anyone. Can't you understand that? Dad. Then why did he say such harsh things to me 2 days ago? I wanted to wake him up and demand answers right away. Yet, seeing him sleep was a rare sight, so I just sat by his side and watched over him until he woke up. You. Why haven't you gone back to New York yet? He should still be groggy from the anesthesia. As soon as he woke up, my father glared sharply at me. Well, I performed your surgery, so I can't leave until I make sure there are no complications. Busybody. When I informed him that I would be performing the surgery, he declared, "I won't have the surgery." He claimed he'd rather let his heart stop than be taken care of by such an ungrateful son. It was Dr. Clark who convinced him otherwise, saying, "You can't fight with your son if you're in the afterlife." I did my best on the surgery, so we could have another father-son fight. I have nothing left to say to you. Yes, you do have something to say. I don't. Yes, you must. Like, who will take care of the fields while you're in the hospital? At that moment, my father's eyes opened wide. If I hadn't quickly held him down, he would have tried to jump out of bed, even though he needed complete rest. If you have time to mess around with the fields, go see as many patients as you can. There it is, your real feelings. You should have said that from the beginning. What? I calmed my flushed, enraged father and laid him back down in bed. Then I revealed what I had been thinking about. I had been considering this the entire time my father was asleep. Was it for me? Is that why you said those things? No. You wanted to send me back to New York, so that I wouldn't quit being a doctor and take up farming instead? No. Don't worry. I'm going to keep being a doctor, because I still want to be your pride and joy. What? My father was at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Just then, Dr. Clark drew back the curtain on his rounds, noticing my father's expression. And he gave a wry, crumpled smile. It's about time you were honest, Miles. Your son is smart, and he knows everything. He fell silent. Dr. Clark, whom my father once adored like an older brother, still had the power to silence him. Accepting defeat, my father dropped his shoulders and stared at his hands. I wasn't very smart. I couldn't see myself doing anything but following in my father's footsteps. I never dreamed my son would say he wanted to be a doctor. And he actually became one. It must have been tough. I'm impressed. Yeah. It was tough. Of course, I couldn't rely on my father, so I managed to graduate college with scholarships and part-time jobs. And after graduation, it was one hardship after another. Yet, those 16 years of struggles were all rewarded by my father's words. I'm proud. You are my, so don't quit. Yeah. You don't need to take over the fields. Go back to New York and see your work through to the end. And then, come back and show your face from time to time. Yeah. Just when I thought he was finally being honest, he wasn't. That last remark was his way of saying, come back and visit occasionally. I understand that now. Speaking of which, Alex, have you considered staying here? What? Dr. Clark's words made me widen my eyes. You're planning to look for work in New York, right? Then, if you're willing, I'd like you to work at this hospital. I've seen your skills firsthand. Dr. Clark. Instinctively, I turned to my father. He had his eyes closed, pretending to sleep, but he eventually nodded, as if to say, do it. And so, thank you. I'd be honored. Likewise. I took Dr. Clark's outstretched hand and shook it firmly. And that's how I ended up staying in my hometown, working as a surgeon under Dr. Clark. 1 month later. My father is still in the hospital but is steadily recovering. While taking over as my father's attending physician from Dr. Clark, I also kept up with my daily work. In this town with its aging population, there are many people with heart concerns. The reputation that a renowned heart specialist had come from New York spread quickly. And patients were coming to the hospital from both inside and outside the town. As the head of the newly established heart clinic, I was working tirelessly every day to alleviate as many patients' fears as possible. And then, amidst all this, when that person appeared before me again, calling me out to a backwater place like this. I'm a busy man. What on earth is Dr. Clark thinking? The man plopped down on a bench in the hallway, complaining irritably. Hey, isn't Dr. Clark here yet? Hurry up and get him. Dr. Clark is very busy. He should be here shortly. You've got quite the attitude. Have you already forgotten your debt to me, Alex? There are patients here. Please keep your voice down, Professor Owens. Yes, the person was none other than Professor Owens. He was the one who blamed me for medical malpractice and eventually got me kicked out of the hospital. Dr. Clark was my mentor back in medical school. If he says he has something to ask, I can't not come, but this is indeed a rundown hospital. The staff here seem to be of poor skill. I didn't say anything. But I didn't expect you to still be working as a doctor. I thought you would have quit after that incident. With Professor Owens's loud voice, the doctors and nurses nearby turned their attention to us. Just as if he had been waiting for this, Professor Owens grinned and raised his voice even more. I can't believe someone accused of medical malpractice is still working as a doctor. Do these people and the patients know about this, Alex? Professor Owens. What about it? If you haven't told them yet, should I? Don't hold back. We're friends, aren't we? I realized Professor Owens intends to get revenge. Because of me, he had missed his chance to become director, and now he was planning to ruin my place here as well. However, I was no longer the same person Professor Owens knew. He wasn't the only one who recognized my abilities. And I now understood that there were things far more important than having my skills acknowledged. I did not commit medical malpractice. What? The malpractice was yours, Professor Owens. You pinned it on me. I intend to reveal the truth from now on. What are you saying? Don't spread such nonsense lies. It's not a lie. Whether it is or not, those who know my skills, my patients and my colleagues here should be aware. As I said this and turned around, I made eye contact with many doctors and nurses. Whether it was because they had heard the commotion, the number of people surrounding us had doubled since earlier. And all of these colleagues, one by one, nodded with a smile. They were all saying they believed in me. I will keep starting over as many times as it takes. I will never give up being a doctor. Are you prepared to keep fighting someone like me? Professor Owens. How dare you, you insolent. Well said, Alex. Dr. Clark. Professor Owens looked shocked as Dr. Clark, who had come up behind him, grabbed him by the shoulder. Then Dr. Clark stepped in front of Professor Owens and suddenly punched him in the face. Ah! Does it hurt? But compared to the patient's pain and the grief of their families, this is nothing. You fool! Dr. Clark. I've heard everything from Alex. It wasn't a medical error that cost that patient their life. It was your arrogance. Thinking only of advancement and neglecting to hone your skills. And it's also my responsibility for recommending someone like you to that hospital. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dr. Clark. Do you even know who you should apologize to? You're hopeless. With a look of complete disappointment on his face, Dr. Clark turned his back on Professor Owens. And he muttered, I'll have to tell Director Miller everything. Upon hearing this, Professor Owens turned pale and collapsed on the spot. After that, Professor Owens's years of wrongdoing were exposed by Dr. Clark, and everything he had built came crashing down. He was immediately dismissed from the hospital, and with his bad reputation spreading, he was effectively exiled from the medical community. And now that the truth about the medical malpractice had been revealed, the bereaved family has filed a lawsuit against him. The verdict is still pending, but he will likely have to pay for his crimes. With no allies left, all alone. Eventually, when my father's discharge was finally in sight, Anna found some time amidst her busy schedule to come visit him. It's been a while. Oh, Anna. Sorry to call you here when you're busy. Are you taking care of yourself? Eating well? Yes, thanks to you. I happened to be there after finishing work and stood dumbfounded. Because my father was smiling from ear to ear. It was the very image of a kindly neighborhood uncle, a face he never showed his own son. When I was struggling with depression and became a recluse, your father would often bring me vegetables. We gradually started talking more. And it's thanks to him that I was able to get back on my feet. I didn't know that. Hey, Alex. Do you have some time to talk? What? Come to think of it, Anna, you dreamed of becoming a flight attendant ever since you were a little girl. You actually made it happen. You remembered? Something from so long ago. Anna smiled shyly as she sat down on a bench in the courtyard. I only told you my true dream, Alex. I was afraid everyone else would laugh at me. Really? But it's impressive. Not many people achieve their childhood dreams. You must have worked really hard. Yeah. I almost gave up so many times. But I couldn't let it go. Do you know why? Anna looked at me seriously and said, "It's because of you, Alex." Me? Yeah. Even when everyone around you doubted and made fun of you for wanting to go to medical school, you worked hard. Without losing focus. You pursued your dream straight on. Seeing you like that gave me courage. It supported me through college and job hunting. When someone you care about is working hard, it makes you want to try your best too. It's strange, isn't it? Her unexpected words made my heart skip a beat. Blushing, Anna confessed, "I was planning to tell you at graduation." However, I left for New York before graduation, and she had held on to her feelings for the entire 16 years. I actually had another dream. It was to meet you again as a successful flight attendant. And then. It's strange. Anna looked glamorous and beautiful in her flight attendant uniform. But she looked even more beautiful now, almost makeup-free and dressed plainly. Can I make that dream come true? Yeah. When I nodded, Anna's eyes glistened with tears as she smiled and said, "Thank you." Anna's dream was to become the girlfriend of someone she had loved for a long time. When she achieved that dream, she was more beautiful than ever before. I'll never forget the brightest smile I saw at that moment. A year later, we got married. My father was the happiest of anyone and declared, with unusual enthusiasm, "I'll definitely give a speech at the wedding." Unfortunately, that will have to wait for now. We're both busy with work. We'll definitely have the ceremony someday. Until then, stay healthy, Dad. That's right, Uncle Miles, or should I say, my father-in-law. As long as you're healthy, any dream can come true. Anna's right. And I've got a skilled doctor nearby. So as your doctor, here's some advice. You've been drinking a little too much lately. How about cutting back? All right. You can't achieve your dreams if you're not healthy. When Dad said that with a wry smile, Anna and I exchanged glances. Then we both smiled at Dad and said, "Exactly." Right after that meeting, Anna left for her next flight. I gazed up at the sky from the hospital window, imagining Anna working as a flight attendant. Doing so gave me the strength to keep trying my best as a doctor. Even if you lose sight of your dreams or goals, you can always start over as many times as you need to. As long as you can remember the feelings you had when you embraced your dream, you can always find the strength to keep going. And as long as my mind and body are healthy, helping others do the same is my job as a doctor. I want to continue to take pride in having chosen this career and in the fact that I am still doing it today.